powerful House Republican Jason Chaffetz has announced he's not running for re-election. And even though Utah's 3rd Congressional District, it's like 2,000 miles away from D.C., right? Well, a lot of people here in the district are pretty tuned into this announcement. It's very welcome news to them. The 5-term Congressman Chaffetz has come under fire for his efforts to rein in the city's legislative agenda, including unsuccessful attempts to kill the Death with Dignity Assisted Suicide Act. Al Weaver, political reporter for the Washington Examiner, here to discuss. So Jason Chaffetz announcing he's not seeking re-election. Was there cigars and champagne at D.C. City Council after this announcement? How are people receiving it?
Well, it's a surprise to a lot of people because Chaffetz has always been one of the more ambitious members of Congress, especially on the Republican side. He's obviously the head of the Oversight Committee, had a lot of power over, especially with Hillary Clinton when her troubles were going on the past year. But lately he's been under criticism from Republicans, especially on the right, and those who are anti-Trump, about his lack of going after Trump over perceived conflicts of interests and business ties. So it's surprising, but I guess it's not all too shocking in that sense that he kind of just had enough of it.
So what's the deal with this guy? So for people who might be hearing his name for the first time, why is he such a guy that's had such influence in the inner workings of D.C. government?
Well, he's always been one in the middle of it. I mean, as I mentioned, he's been very ambitious. There have been talk initially that he could run for Orrin Hatch's Senate seat if that opens up in 2018. Hatch has not said if he's going to run yet, but no matter what, Chaffetz is out for that. But the chatter right now is that he's going to run in 2020 for Utah's governorship. That could possibly be running against one of the Romney sons. That's still to be seen. Well,
what's his explanation as to why he was always sticking his nose into D.C.'s business?
Well, I mean, the one thing, especially look at the one big thing is he always was the House Oversight Chairman.
Right. He
was always in that. It's a very high-profile position. That's going to be a big. That's going to be a big one for Republicans. A lot of ambitious types. Perhaps Trey Gowdy, he may be coming in as become chairman of oversight. We're going to see what happens there, but D.C. residents they should definitely be happy with the news.
So this is something we're starting to see more of. I mean, Chaffetz is one of 9 Republicans who have, resigned their House seats, announced plans to retire, or declared their intentions to run for other office. So is there an opening here for Democrats?
Maybe not for this seat, but I think it helps them in the broader goal of trying to push more Democrats into seats. You saw the special elections that are going on right now. John Ossoff last night in Georgia came very close to getting to that 50% marker, fell about 1.5 points short. But Democrats, they're really trying. The House is going to be their way to get back into the head of government. The Senate map is very daunting for them looking ahead to 2018. The House map is where they can make some hay. They may not be able to do well in Chaffetz's seat because it's a very deep Republican, it's a very ruby red seat. Utah, it's tough to crack for Democrats, but it gives them an opening to look for other seats to work their way back to the majority.
Right. So if my math is right, we've got about 20 or 21 months until we'd have a new chairman for oversight, since he's going to fill out his term. He's just not going to run for re-election. What will this do for D.C.? Depending on who steps into that seat, I mean, do leaders in D.C. see an opening here, expanding their home rule a little bit more after he vacates that position?
Well, possibly. It depends what Republicans have taken over. As I mentioned, Trey Gowdy, he's probably the favorite, even though he's one of the less senior members of it. He's looked at as someone who could lead that committee moving forward. Jim Jordan, he was one who also ran for the committee chairmanship a couple years ago. He's a House Freedom Caucus member. I'm not sure if he's going to get the requisite votes to get that. Gowdy's likely the favorite, so we'll see what it means for Washington, D.C., though.
Right. Meantime, the party is at Eleanor Holmes Norton's house tonight for sure, I'll bet. Let's talk about some other political news today, specifically here in Virginia. This race for governor really heating up, getting a lot of national attention, much like this congressional seat in Georgia did. Democrat Tom Perriello, he's trailing the lieutenant governor at this point, but George Soros, members of the Dave Matthews Band, and John Grisham, the author, they're all pumping money into this race. So what gives with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really tight one. I mean, Virginia's governor race is the big one after the presidential race. This is going to be looked at as a referendum on Donald Trump. So what happens on June 13th is going to be really interesting. You have Tom Perriello, the far left Democrat, more progressive candidate who's backed by Bernie Sanders, going against Ralph Northam, the lieutenant governor, who's backed by the establishment. Both Democratic senators, Mark Warner, Tim Kaine, behind him. Obviously, the governor's behind him. It's going to be a real interesting race. I mean, and it really shows this Democratic, the battle within the Democratic Party between the Sanders wing and the more establishment wing. Who wins? It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, for students of political history and interest, it's going to be fascinating as we move forward this year.
Definitely.
Just playing right off the presidential, there's never stuff not to talk about. Al Weaver with the Washington Examiner. Appreciate you coming in. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
So.